The word Shekan, if you can see, there's 3 Hebrew letters that form it. You see this letter on the end is the Nun, then you have the Sheen and Kaf. You put them together, and it forms the word Sok, which is a word for tabernacle. Did you hear what I just said? Why does he want to dwell? So that he can tabernacle. What is the purpose of the tabernacle? It's a sanctuary, a consecrated place, a holy set-apart place. That's what he wants to do. Nothing less, nothing more than having a consecrated holy place so the fire of Yahweh can stand over the top of it. Amen. Let me dwell among them. The word among in Hebrew, Strong's number 8432, the word is tavek, and of course it means midst and middle. In other words, this podium sitting right in the tavek, the midst or the middle. But it can also mean in the inside of it. Ooh. So that I can dwell or tabernacle inside them. What does all of the above tell us? It tells us that Adam and Eve are created from the same source, Ish, fire. And what we have learned thus far is that fire represents the manifestation or the personification or the visible presence of the person of Yahweh, known as the Word or the Seed who was made flesh in the earth. Am I right? And he's also told us that the fire has to be contained in a consecrated, sanctified, set-apart, holy tabernacle. Did y'all hear me? It's getting quiet. Now you notice why a lot of times there's not much fire, just maybe a little smoke. Because the tabernacle is not consecrated and holy and set apart. Hello, somebody. So if we want a fire kindled on the inside, then we've got to sanctify the house. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, I've been trying to tell you that. Sanctify the house. If you want a fire on the inside, the spirit of man is the candle of Yahweh. He'll dwell in only a sanctified vessel. Wait a second. What have we been saying? All of the time we accused him of being in our services, and yet we had all of the fleshly, carnal, perverted things going on in a lot of the congregations. Hello? And we said he was there. I think the accusation might have been against someone else, because he said, I will not come into any place unless it's consecrated and sanctified. Well, who do you think showed up? My goodness. Did you realize that the fleshly tabernacle has the ability to be consumed? Remember that asah, the word for moth? You need to be careful to watch for the moth that'll tear up the flesh and eat the flesh away, destroy the tabernacle. If we could see a lot of these supposed sanctified vessels, we'd see the damage that the moth. You ever seen? A number of years ago, someone gave me, I think it's called cashmere, a long coat made out of one of them. Very expensive. And I had it hanging in a closet because it was so heavy, it was an overcoat, that the weather never got cold enough for me to wear it. And so finally, no, not quite. I decided I was going to make a trip, and I figured it was going to be cold, so I'm going to dig this thing out, and guess what? The moths had gotten a hold of it. Are y'all hearing me? But you know what Yahweh had the tabernacle constructed with? The wood and planks on the inside were made out of cedar for the purpose of repelling the moths. What am I trying to tell you? If you're not careful, there will be a tendency for the moths to hang around. You need to make sure that whatever is being put on the inside of you repels them, not attracts them. See, a moth is also attracted to the flame. Are you hearing me? And you wonder why a lot of times it seems like all hell's been launched against you. Well, if you're a flame, well, the moths are coming. Well, if there's nothing here for the moths to tear up and destroy, then you don't have anything to worry about. And Yeshua makes a statement to his disciples when the enemies were coming against him. He said, the prince of this world's coming, and guess what? The moths have nothing in me. He has nothing in me, nothing for him to work with. Do y'all see the pattern here? This is what Yahweh's trying to teach us regarding the building this tabernacle. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, it says, Yahweh is a consuming fire. And in Deuteronomy 33, verse 2, I want you to focus there. This is Yahweh giving Moses the words to the Song of Moses. And this is what Moses said regarding Yahweh coming down on top of Mount Sinai. And by the way, when he came down on top of Mount Sinai, what happened to the mountain? It was on fire. Wait a second. Y'all stop and look at me for a second. Do you realize what the mountain represented? You know what the word mountain in Hebrew is? Tell me what it is quickly. Har. But if you add the H suffix, the feminine suffix on the end of it, the word hara means one who's pregnant. Yahweh was coming down on the top of the mountain in a pillar of fire to produce godly seed in the earth. And his bride was supposed to be washed. She'd been given 3 days. She'd went through the purging of the plagues. She'd went through a ritual mikvah in the Red Sea. She'd been brought here to the place at Mount Sinai. And the last thing Yahweh said, wash your clothes. I'm giving you 3 days to get the vessel sanctified, and I'll take the fire. He could have just as surely took the same fire that was consuming Sinai and brought it down over the camp of the people and consumed them with his presence. But they withdrew, and only one member went up and received the seed of Yahweh known as the Torah, the law, and that was Moshe. Can y'all see the pattern here? Why? Why is that? I don't think we need to be allowing the enemy to keep us from having the seed of the word of Yahweh on the inside of us. I think if we will look at the man in the mirror and begin to look at whatever it is we've been cultivating and holding close to us, you know, mauves can be real pretty. They can. They can be so pretty, but they're very destructive. And they're such delicate and fragile individuals. You'd never imagine that they could do that kind of damage. In this particular phrase, it says, let me read it to you, in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 2. Can y'all hold on a little bit? And Yahweh came from Sinai and rose up from Mount Seir unto them, and he shined forth from Mount Paran. And he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Did you hear that? Wait a second now. It says that he came with 10,000s of saints. You realize that he had a company of angelic hosts there to witness the encounter? Do you realize in a Hebrew wedding ceremony, when the marriage is going to be consummated, remember it's a blood oath, a blood covenant. You need to hear me. Because when the marriage was consummated, the witnesses were there to bring evidence that the bride was a virgin. Did you hear what I just said? That's why he brought a company of witnesses with him. Are you following me? It says that he came with 10,000s of his saints, and from his right hand went a fiery law for them. I want to focus in on that phrase, fiery law for them. In the Hebrew, it's mimino eshdat lamo. The word mimino is translated, if you look at it, you'll see the mem at the front. It means from. And then you'll see this, well, it's transposed. It's actually got swapped around. When I did my notes, I apologize. You see on the end of it here, you see the word, the Hebrew letter Holam Vav on the very end of it, Mem, and then the Holam Vav. And right in the center is the word Min, and that is the word for hand. Y'all see that? He is, the Holam Vav means he is, from his right hand went what? A fiery law. Well, this word here is the one I want you to focus on, and that is the word eshdat. Now, when it's being translated, there's a lot of confusion because there's no word that it was translated into, this word eshdat. So you have to break it in half. And the Masoretic text will lead you to believe that that's exactly what their intent was to do, to break it in half to the esh, which is what? Fire, and the word dot, which is the word for law. Now, his word is fire. Am I correct? Now, if you go back and look at how the Targum of Onkelos translated it translates it this way. His right hand wrote, from amidst the fire he gave Torah to us. Now, the rabbis even acknowledge that the fire that we're talking about has always existed, and it represents Yahweh, and it also is the source of the Torah, the law, which went forth from his right hand. And who's the right hand? Benjamin, the son of the right hand, the Messiah is. So you go back and look, and you find that when you see the Torah and the Word, it is nothing less than the fire. And Yahweh is a consuming fire. It will consume us unless we have added to the man and woman the name, the Yod, He, Vav, He. Without that, the fire consumes you. Do y'all see that? It's not hard. Now, as we get into it, you know now why Nadab and Abihu were consumed. Do y'all remember when they offered strange fire? You remember I told you earlier that the enemy, if you're not careful, will masquerade. And sometimes we accuse Yahweh of being the source of the fire when he's not. Do y'all hear me? The enemy will kindle a fire very quickly if we're not careful. Let's look at the names Nadab and Abihu. You can see that in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1, and in Numbers chapter 3 and some other places. The Strong's Concordance defines the word Nadab as generous. And that's one time when they flat missed it. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, yep, they missed that one. If you look at it in Hebrew, you'll see that the word Nadab means to incite willingly. That means their intent was to provoke the people, like inciting a riot. My intent is to stir you up and turn this into a riotous mob. Well, that's what his name literally means. How do you figure that? Let's break it down and look at it. If you look at the word Nadab, it's seen in Ezra chapter 7, verse 13, and it's referencing those that had the opportunity to leave Babylon willingly. Well, if you look here and look at the root of the word Nadav, you see that it is Nun Dalet, which is the word Nod. Remember, Cain went to the land of Nod, and the word Nod means the place of wandering. That's also the root of the word Nidah, which means unclean. And the word Nidah is associated with one who compromises himself either with an impure blood flow or who's been in an adulterous situation. That's what that word means. And so basically, as you see the root Nod with a bait on the end of it, remember the Hebrew letter bait references the house. And so his name literally means that Nadab incited those who could leave Babylon. Remember who Babylon was, the mother of harlots. But he incited or provoked them to stay as wanderers, bringing uncleanness, nidah, into the house. Did you hear what I just said? Do you understand that? Nadab was provoking perversion in the house. That's why the fire of Yahweh went out from the altar and consumed him. It wasn't because, well, he just forgot the proper instructions. No, sir, no, ma'am. It was because he intentionally incited the people to a compromise. If you go back and look at it, he was offering fire that had already been offered to a fallen or pagan idol. And that pagan idol, pagan god, represents another husband. You see what I'm talking about? Let's look at the word Abihu. In the Strong's, it's translated as, he is my father. However, if you look at how it's always connected to Nadab, he's always in an inferior or subjugated position to this Nadab. And so basically, it's saying that both Abihu, or Abihu, however you want to pronounce it, and Nadab were slaves, if you will, perverted themselves with the husband or this god that drove them spiritually and were intent on leading the people of Israel into the very same thing in their priestly roles. And Yahweh consumed them with fire. Let me just tell you this. You're going to start hearing of men who stand in the priestly position and who are offering strange fire. You're going to start hearing of these men falling down graveyard dead, consumed by the presence of Yahweh for offering strange fire in the sanctified house. Did you hear what I just said? Now, the word strange there is the word zur, and it means strange. It can also mean prostitute. It can infer in intercourse with a strange woman, sexual perversion, as in a man with a man, or lesbianism with a woman. And the reason for that is because physical seed is not released in the proper place. And that's why Yahweh does not care for either of the two. And that's why Yahweh consumed Nadab and Abihu.